Jury selection does resume today in the sex trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs. Prosecutors allege the music mogul coerced and abused women for years with help from a network of associates and employees while silencing victims through blackmail, kidnapping, arson, and beatings. They accuse Diddy of using his, quote, power and prestige to force female victims into drugged up, elaborately produced sexual performances with male sex workers in events that were dubbed freak-offs. Diddy's attorneys are expected to argue that the government is demonizing and distorting the sexual activity of consenting adults. Jury selection began Monday with 36 potential jurors questioned by the judge about whether they could be fair and impartial in a trial that will feature violent and sexually explicit videos. Testimony in the trial slated to start next week, and since his arrest, important to note that Diddy has been held at a federal detention center in Brooklyn. So much to discuss as jury selection does resume. So let's bring in David Seltzer, a criminal defense attorney and managing partner at Seltzer Mayberg, LLC. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And first off, I do have to ask you, today is day 3 of jury selection. How exactly does jury selection work and maybe differ in such a high-profile case like this one?
So jury selection in federal court is different than state court. In state court, the defense attorneys and the prosecutors have the ability to question the jurors. In this case, as it were in federal court, the parties submitted a 17-page questionnaire that was approved by the court to the prospective jurors. That whittled down the hundreds of jurors to what I believe is about 122 that are now in-person questioning. The judge is the one who does the questioning. The defense attorneys and government don't have the ability very much to question the jury. So then the government and the defense have strikes to strike jurors for cause. They have preemptory challenges to remove jurors. And the goal is to find 18 unbiased jurors who can sit fairly and impartially to opine and come to a conclusion and a verdict on this case. Therein lies the problem and the question. I don't know how they're going to find 18 people who have no knowledge of this, who live under a rock. And what's most striking to me is they are not sequestering the jury. So you're asking people to put their lives on hold and sit in a courtroom for 8 to 10 weeks, but go home every night and live in a bubble in their residence by not talking to their friends and family, not looking at a TV, not looking at the media. We're living in a world and society where people live on their devices. So to tell people they can't touch their phones for 9 weeks, I don't see them lasting 9 minutes once they leave that courtroom.
I was going to say, is that realistic to assume that they go home and they're not going to be on their phones, on the computers, maybe talking with loved ones and friends about what's going on? Is that realistic?
I don't see it as realistic. I think you have a very high-profile trial. You have celebrity status. You know, people have been asking me how it compares to other trials. Diddy's a worldwide phenomenon, a worldwide name. Everybody knows Diddy. So to tell people to stay off their devices, I think the court is asking for trouble, with the utmost respect to the court. I think they're asking for a mistrial. And I think they're going to see lots of motions throughout this case. If they run out of their alternate jurors, they have to start over. So I think the sequestration is the right thing to do to get a jury trial to a just conclusion promptly versus keeping it as a media circus, because we all know these days that cases are tried in the media. There's going to be information leaked from both sides.
And as we take a look here, once again, a live look outside the federal courthouse ahead of day 3 of jury selection, media coverage. You touched on this, but this is a case that so many people are watching. It's all over the headlines, all over the news. So can that impact whether the jury is really able to stay impartial? Because again, as you mentioned, it is hard to find people who have not heard at least something about the case or seen that video that we just showed involving Cassie.
Well, it's not even about something about the case. The question is, you're now saying to these people, these prospective jurors, forget what you may have heard, but you can't touch anything for the next 2 months. It's just an impossibility the way I see it. People are not designed that way anymore. We all live and die by our phones. We communicate with our phones. People get pop-ups on their phones. There's no media in the courtroom. We know that. This is federal court. Whether you believe in that or not, it's an archaic system, but the courts don't allow cameras. So we get these little writings and these little drawings. and we have to rely on the individuals in the court to relay the information. The jury will hear the same thing from the media. Now, at the end of the day, when they go home, people want to know. People are going to speculate. The jury is in the only position here to know the truth. Now they might get curious. Well, what is the media saying? What's going on outside the courtroom? We don't know. So I think it's an impossibility here to say that the jury is not going to poke their head into the news and poke their head into the media.
What does it appear Diddy's defense is going to try to argue early on in the case during the opening statements, which are slated to begin next week?
You know, in reviewing the evidence and examining the case, the defense is consent, that these people consented to their actions. The video that we're all seeing on CNN, in and of itself, is not a federal crime. Whether you think of the crime or whether you think of Diddy and those actions, it's not a crime. It's a state crime, yes. But the government is going to try and spin that into a concert of actions of sex trafficking, freak-offs, and all these things. But the defense has to get on the stand and talk about consent. These girls consented. This was Diddy's girlfriend. She wanted this. She voluntarily came there. She intended to participate. There was no force, no coercion, and she was there willingly and a voluntary participant.
What kind of timeline are we looking at here from jury selection, which began Monday, to an actual verdict? Do we have kind of a breakdown of how long all of this could go?
Well, the estimate for trial now is 8 to 10 weeks. Federal court moves very quick. I'm sure the judge cleared his docket. This is the only thing on it for the next 2 months. So we really have no way to know exactly how long it's going to take. We have to go by the estimate of the parties. But there are lots of witnesses. There's lots of evidence. And once the government rests their case, the defense has the ability to put on their case. There's going to be defense witnesses. And the questions everyone's asking me is Diddy going to testify? And we don't know the answer to that. You know, there's no way to know if he's going to testify or not. He might. People want to hear from him. So it's a tough situation when a defendant in this type of high-profile case has to decide whether to put himself on the stand. I think we're going to hear from Diddy. I think it's that kind of case, and I think we're going to see him on the stand at some point. But to tell you how long it's going to take, we've got to go by the court estimates. Again, that's also about question, though. Sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
That also assumes there's no jury issues. Again, it all goes back to sequestration. I would not be surprised to see a mistrial in this case.
If convicted, what are we realistically talking about for a possible sentence? Does it appear possible that Diddy is sentenced to prison if found guilty and for a long, long period of time?
So it's the most certain prison sentence, if he is found guilty, is a 15-year minimum mandatory on one of these charges, and it's 15 to life. So he's 55 years old. Everyone keeps talking about why didn't he take a plea? The government offered him a reduced plea. Nobody knows what the reduced plea was, so we're all speculating and trying to figure out why he didn't take a plea. If it wasn't time served, I don't think he should have taken a plea based on the facts and circumstances as he sees it. But at the end of the day, if he is convicted as charged, the 55-year-old gentleman will face a minimum of 15 to life in prison.
What might it do if cameras were allowed in the courtroom and you could actually watch all of this unfold? How would the situation maybe play out differently than just having journalists and reporters there inside? And you touched on this, but gathering the information and then bringing it outside to kind of relay it. If folks out there could actually watch it for themselves, how might that change things?
So we've seen lots of trials broadcast throughout the years. We've seen OJ's, Casey Anthony's, Bill Cosby. They're all monitored. They're all broadcast throughout the world. We live in a society that wants to see live action. We live in a society that craves media. How is that going to change the trial? It might change the way the parties do things in the courtroom, but it's not going to change the nuts and bolts of how the trial works and what's going on. It's just going to feed into the American centralization of wanting to see things in real time. It's going to give us immediate gratification of what we see. And that's what we live in today with social media at our fingertips. We want the information. We want to see what's going on. So the media isn't for the courtroom and the parties. It's for the public.
All right. David Seltzer, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and help break it all down. Anything else you want to add here about the Diddy case before I let you go?
Yeah, one thing that I find interesting is that everyone talks about the army of lawyers Diddy has, but nobody talks about the army of lawyers the government has. You know, and the United States government is 6,300 full-time United States prosecutors with an open checkbook of United States taxpayer money. So the government finally has a defendant that can afford 7 lawyers or 8 lawyers or however many he wants and defend himself. So why we're making a big deal out of the defense army of lawyers, but no one's talking about the government army of lawyers, I find that a little interesting.
All right, David, thank you again for taking the time to join us here. Of course, we'll be in touch as we see all this play out over the next several weeks. Thank you again.
My pleasure. Thanks. Have a great day.
You too. And of course, we are going to stay on top of the case as it does play out. I can tell you that Mike Page will be hosting a special on our YouTube page. Just go to YouTube and search Live Now from Fox. You can watch it all later on today as he provides up-to-the-minute updates. And of course, as those updates come in, we will bring them to you on air as well. But again, just head over to our YouTube page and search Live Now from Fox. While you're there, make sure to hit that subscribe button because you'll get updates when we do have live videos and, of course, major updates in cases like this one.